In 1995, Anthology was a global event. Midnight queues, packed record shops, everyone watching together. 30 years later, the world has changed, and so has the way we discover the Beatles. Today, it's TikTok clips, algorithms, playlists, and a whole generation who never saw the original series. So this new anthology isn't just a reissue, it's a test of how the Beatles fit into 2025. A new box set, a new Anthology 4, new mixes, new discoveries, and a new audience. The question is, how does it all hold up? I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and today we're diving deep into the new Beatles Anthology box set, and especially Anthology 4. We'll look at what's new, what's changed, how it sounds, how fans are reacting, and what this release tells us about the future of Beatles projects.
They were the greatest rock and roll band of all time.
In 1995, Anthology felt like the story was finally being told properly.
And now, 25 years after the screams died down, it's happening again. The Beatles Anthology, Volume 1. New music. Available at record stores now. You haven't heard everything yet.
Fast forward 30 years and we don't gather around the TV schedules or queue for CDs anymore. Music arrives instantly, and younger listeners discover the Beatles through clips, playlists, live streams, and algorithms. So this anthology isn't just about looking back, it's about trying to speak to several generations at once. Now, the heart of this entire campaign is Anthology 4. This is the disc or LP that most fans were truly waiting for. It contains 13 previously unreleased tracks, a selection of material taken from the recent Super Deluxe editions, and brand new 2025 remixes of Free as a Bird and Real Love by Jeff Lynne, assisted by his longtime engineer, Steve J. Think of Anthology 4 as an alternate Beatles timeline. It isn't the best of leftovers, it plays more like a parallel version of their career. The early attempts, the experiments, the false starts, the in-jokes, and those wonderful almost but not quite takes that reveal how tracks we've known for all these years came together. In another universe, most of these tracks would slot neatly back into Anthologies 1 to 3, right where they belong. But rebuilding those sets would have required huge amounts of time, money, and of course asking everyone to buy the whole lot again. Judged on its own, Anthology 4 turns out to be much more substantial and far more rewarding than I and many thought it would be. One of the great pleasures here is hearing early Beatles material stripped back. Money, the only With the Beatles era track included, is wonderfully raw and clean. If ever there was a case for an underdubbed Beatles album, this would be it. I love how they sound on these early tracks, a tight, hungry band in a great sounding studio, playing with real drive, ambition, and conviction.
1, 2, 3, 4.
A Hard Day's Night has always been near the top of my favourite Beatles albums, and the early takes of Tell Me Why and If I Fell are two of this set's standout moments.
You made a mistake. I know you did.
They capture Lennon at his finest, confident, expressive, and completely unafraid to show his vulnerability. Matchbox wasn't on many people's bingo cards, but its inclusion is surprisingly effective. With the triple-tracked Ringo vocals stripped away, the track's raw spirit comes through. Tight playing, natural chemistry, and a reminder just how well this kind of song suited Ringo. Like many of you, a real revelation for me on Anthology 4 is I Need You. Compared to the version on Help, this earlier take is brighter and more alive. There's a spring in the rhythm that the released version just doesn't have. Paul's bass is playful, everyone sounds like they're genuinely enjoying themselves, and the finished take now feels a little gloomy by comparison. It's also a joy hearing John's personality in the studio chat. He's performing for the tiny group in the room, not for the world, and that intimacy is something only archive releases like this can capture.
In My Life, take 1.
John's vocal on In My Life is beautiful, quietly controlled and deeply expressive. I've always loved this song, but hearing him like this really highlights how different the track might have felt with a lighter, more acoustic arrangement to match the intimacy of his delivery. The early Nowhere Man attempt is another fascinating alternate universe moment. That Birds-like feel has a charm of its own. I suspect someone out there will eventually try flying in the finished vocals onto this take. Anthology 4 really hits its stride when we reach 1966 and especially 1967.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to.
I never tire of hearing new Strawberry Fields Forever alternates, and the faster Take 26 here is yet another piece of the puzzle, a reminder of just how great this song is. The instrumental She's Leaving Home is genuinely moving. I've been fortunate enough to hear a pristine 30 inches per second master tape of the song at Abbey Road, a truly spine-tingling experience. This version doesn't quite match that, but it comes surprisingly close. Stripped of the vocal, you can appreciate the sheer beauty of Mike Leander's arrangement. Then there's Baby You're a Rich Man, a track we celebrated in the summer as the Beatles' hidden gem, and the outtakes here absolutely confirm that.
Cannabis resin too.
Yeah, if you got any cannabis, send it in.
Takes 11 and 12 have everything. A cool, slightly off-centre song, great playing, great sound, and that intangible Beatles ingredient, humour and joy running through the session and performance. With Sgt. Pepper finished and yet to hit the shops, this track shows the group at the absolute height of their post-touring powers. Confident, inventive, unstoppable. The All You Need Is Love rehearsal is another highlight. The vocal on the record always felt lacking something to me, but on this rehearsal it has a natural warmth. You also hear them loosening up, joking around before one of the biggest television moments of their lives. Fool on the Hill Take 5, the extended instrumental, is a beauty. I'm a sucker for flutes and recorders, and here you can really appreciate the details. The acoustic guitars, the piano lines, the interlocking parts. It feels complete in its own way. And then we get to the orchestral track of I Am the Walrus, another of the standout moments of the entire project. Commercial stem separation software can do incredible things, but in my experience, I find that it struggles to isolate strings and brass convincingly. Here we get the actual tape, and it's stunning. If one track proves that George Martin deserves the 5th Beatle title, it's this. Hey Bulldog is one of my favourite Beatles tracks, full stop, and I'm glad it's here. The instrumental is interesting, especially the chatter, but without Paul's bass, it loses a lot of its punch. Now we come to the most divisive part of this set, the brand new 2025 mixes of Free as a Bird and Real Love. These mixes have split the fanbase more than anything else. Let's start with Free as a Bird. The 1995 mix is, for many of us, the authentic sound of the song. Paul's deep bass and John's ghostly cassette vocal. It's been part of the emotional identity of Anthology for nearly 30 years. The new 2025 mix is quite different. It's louder, less bass-heavy, and John's newly clarified voice sits much more forward. Technically impressive, emotionally different. Personally, I would have loved to hear the cleaner vocals paired with Geoff Emmerich's original, more atmospheric mix. As it stands, the new version is interesting, and some fans prefer it, but for me, it isn't an across-the-board improvement. Real Love is a different story entirely. Ever since Giles's 2015 remix for OnePlus, that has been my go-to version. The new 2025 mix, though, isn't just a clean-up, it's almost a reconstruction. Jeff Lynne and Steve J have used 2 different Lennon vocal takes from 2 different demos, and you can hear it immediately. The phrasing changes, certain words are elongated, and even the lyrics shift. Lost like some forgotten dream becomes gone like some forgotten dreams. You also hear noticeable timing differences. John holds syllables longer, emphasizes different words, and the emotional tone subtly shifts. Another change that will matter to many is the treatment of George Harrison's guitar. Some of his guitar phrasing, those small but distinctive ornamental lines that added character to the 1996 mix, have been toned down or removed entirely. The first listen is honestly quite a shock. You think you know the vocal you're about to hear, and suddenly you don't. But as the song went on, I found myself adjusting, and I can appreciate what they were aiming for. The clearest, most authentic presentation of John's voice that today's technology can produce. It's also worth noting that the restored 4K music video released on the 21st of November uses an extended version of this 2025 mix, including an extra 20 seconds of material not included on the CD or vinyl. So even within this campaign, we're already seeing multiple variants. Overall, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't love it, I don't hate it, but it doesn't replace the earlier versions for me. Giles's 2015 mix remains my personal favourite, and more importantly, the earlier mixes remain available on Anthology 1 and 2 in this very set, so nothing has been overwritten. Before we leave the new Threetles material, we have to talk about Now and Then. I said this when it came out, and I still feel the same way. Using Now and Then to tie into the revised Red and Blue albums in 2023 was one of Apple's weakest strategic decisions in years. On paper, it looked neat. A final Beatles song tied to the 50th anniversary of their most famous compilations. In practice, it felt rushed. Had Now and Then been held back to headline this anthology anniversary, the sense of occasion would have been enormous. It could have recaptured some of that 1995 magic. Instead, their final song became a footnote rather than the headline. Now let's zoom out and talk more broadly about how this set sounds as a whole, and how people are actually consuming Anthology in 2025. Across the board, the sound quality on this new Anthology box is excellent. On vinyl, Alex Wharton's cuts are dynamic, open and detailed. Optimal's pressing quality, at least on my copy, is excellent. On CD, the mastering is excellent too, and as you can see from this waveform of I Need You, it's full and dynamic. However, no amount of knob twiddling could ever save the sound of Now and Then. The MAL-assisted separation has worked wonders on some of the more historically challenging sources. Tracks like That'll Be the Day and In Spite of All the Danger now open up in surprising ways. You can hear right into Percy Phillips's front room. The air, the space, the immediacy, instead of something muffled behind layers of history. The Ed Sullivan and Blackpool Night Out performances have been improved, and many other tracks across all 3 volumes have received similar subtle cleanups. They're still more historical documents than repeat listens, though the modern polish helps. Some outtakes now have a light stereo ambience, and some fades differ slightly from the 1990s editions, details only noticeable in strict comparisons. All of this leads to one of the big fan questions. What is actually left in the vaults now? Giles Martin has said that very little remains worth releasing. His father once said something similar 30 years ago, and yet material keeps appearing. Based on what we hear from 1967 in particular, the Magical Mystery Tour outtakes, the I Am the Walrus orchestral track, Fool on the Hill, Baby You're a Rich Man, it's hard not to feel that there are still some fascinating tapes sitting on the shelves. And no, I don't mean Carnival of Light. Rubber Soul is widely rumoured to be the next Super Deluxe box set. If that happens, it will be one of the most anticipated Beatles boxes yet. They've certainly had plenty of time to plan it, so at least it won't be a rushed job. However, as the Red and Blue campaign showed with Now and Then, Apple's plans can shift at any time. Going forward, Apple's main focus will clearly be on the 4 planned biopic films, positioning the Beatles as an active cultural presence, not simply a legacy act. Now we have to address something crucial: how people are consuming Anthology in 2025. I ran a poll on my YouTube community tab, and over 2,700 of you responded. 10% bought the vinyl box, 15% bought the CD box, 23% bought Anthology 4 on its own, and 51% said they're just streaming it. Back in 1995, that last statistic would have been unimaginable. Anthology was something you owned. It lived on your shelf. It was part of the furniture. Today, for half the audience, and probably even a larger percentage outside hardcore Beatles circles, Anthology is something you access, not something you buy. And we have to be honest about the price. This is a premium product in a non-premium economy, and many fans simply can't justify it, which is why streaming has become the most cost-effective route for a lot of people. Anthology 4 being available separately takes the pressure off, but the main box remains a serious investment. One of the most noticeable things about this campaign has been just how many younger people have been talking about Anthology online. Most of them weren't even born when the original series came out, and honestly, that's a wonderful thing. It proves that the Beatles are still reaching new listeners, not just relying on the generations who were already here. At the same time, many long-time fans have commented that Apple's marketing now seems to be aimed almost entirely at the younger end of the audience, and it's understandable that some people feel a little left behind after supporting the releases for decades. But I don't think this is a case of younger fans replacing older ones. What we're seeing is a strategic shift. Apple knows the long-time fans are here. We're already engaged. The real challenge now is reaching the people who weren't alive in 1995, let alone 1964. In that sense, giving younger fans more visibility may not just be a choice, it may be the only way to ensure the Beatles remain culturally alive for the next 30 or 40 years. In 1995, Anthology was aimed squarely at the existing fan base. In 2025, it's trying to speak to everyone, the collectors who've been here for decades, the people discovering band through streaming, and the brand new fans encountering the Beatles through short-form video. That can only be healthy for the long-term future of the catalogue. The more people discovering this music, whether through vinyl, CDs, streaming, or a 30-second TikTok, the better. And if Anthology 2025 becomes a doorway into the deeper parts of the Beatles story for a new generation, that's something to celebrate. Speaking personally as someone in the middle, too young for 1964 and too old for TikTok, I can see both sides, but it's a fair and important discussion. Who are these releases really for, and how do you move forward without leaving anyone behind? Which brings us to one of Apple's most consequential decisions, making Anthology 4 available separately. When the box was first announced, it looked as if the only way to hear the new material was to buy the entire 12 LP or 6 CD set. Unsurprisingly, that felt presumptuous and frankly a bit insulting for many fans. To Apple's credit, they read the room and made Anthology 4 available on its own. That was absolutely the right decision. But the fact that all 3 reunion tracks sit together on side 4 also suggests it may have been the plan all along. Either way, it made the project far more accessible and much more suited to how people listen today, and it signalled that Apple understands that not everyone can, or wants to, buy a massive box set just to hear a handful of new tracks. I'd love to play you short clips from some of these tracks, to demonstrate the real love vocal differences or the shift in atmosphere in the new Free as a Bird mix. But because of the way YouTube's copyright system works and how strict the record companies are, that simply isn't possible. It's a shame because channels like this one are effectively promoting the music and keeping the interest alive. Hopefully, one day we'll see a more sensible system for responsible review use. But for now, just shouting fair use doesn't always work. So, how has Anthology 4 been received? Unsurprisingly, opinions are very mixed. Some fans absolutely love it. They enjoy the 1967 material, the chatter, the false starts, the glimpses behind the curtain. For them, Anthology 4 is a celebration of the Beatles' creativity, a delightful addition to their catalogue. Others are far more critical. They point to recycled tracks from the Super Deluxe editions. They feel the tracklist is conservative, and they strongly dislike the new mixes of Real Love and Free as a Bird. Then there's the broad middle ground, people who recognise the flaws but still enjoy the set for what it is. They accept the compromises and appreciate the highlights. And I think it's important to say that none of these viewpoints are wrong. All of them come from a place of passion. Beatles fans care. That's why discussions get heated. That's why people write long posts about fade-outs and being 1 second too long or too short. That passion is part of what's kept the band alive for so long. Which leads to the big question. What does Anthology 2025 actually mean? For me, it comes down to this. Anthology 2025 is a bridge. It connects the 1995 moment when the Beatles told their story in a controlled, curated way with the 2025 world, where the story is continually being reshaped by technology, younger listeners, and by the modern landscape of media. On its own terms, Anthology 4 is fascinating, sometimes flawed, but ultimately rewarding. More importantly, nothing here takes anything away. The original albums still exist, the original mixes still exist, the 1990s Anthology CDs and DVDs still exist. This project isn't replacing anything, it's adding a new layer. So, is Anthology 2025 a Beatles release for a new generation? I think it is, but it's also a release for the generation who came before. It's for teenagers discovering the band for the first time on streaming. It's for the fans who were there in 1964, and it's for those of us who experienced Anthology in 1995 and now get to revisit it with fresh ears and more context. It's not perfect, it could have been braver, but it's meaningful and often moving, and it gives us new ways to experience the greatest band there ever was. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so do let me and everyone else know what you think about the new Anthology in the comments. By the time you watch this, the TV series will have already premiered on Disney+, so feel free to let me know your thoughts on that too. There's a lot more Beatles content coming up on the channel in December, including the 60th anniversary of Day Tripper We Can Work It Out and, of course, Rubber Soul, so I hope you'll join me for those. But that's all for this time, so I'll say bye for now and thanks for watching.
In my life, I love you more.